Texarkana in 1946 was nothing more than a small town straddling the Texas-Arkansas border, a place at first glance that seemed like any ordinary southern town. Quiet streets lined with modest homes where everyone knew their neighbors. It was a post-war American town, its residents slowly rebuilding lives after the madness of World War II. People in Texarkana, like all the others across the country, were thirsting to move on and welcome the peace that had finally returned. But beneath this perfect surface, something sinister lurked in the darkness. A terror yet unknown would cast an intense dark shadow over this seemingly peaceful community. Imagine the fear of living in the constant worry that you or your loved ones could be the target of a killer who strikes without warning. It was so shocking and twisted that it would forever change the way the town looked at itself. But little did everyone know that something far more devilish would soon place Texarkana in the lexicon of evil words, the Phantom Killer. This is no ghost story, however. What transpired in Texarkana in 1946 was very, very real. The events that occurred were brutal, violent, and worst of all, unsolved. What would you do if your peaceful town suddenly became the hunting ground for an unknown predator? This is the story of Phantom Killer, a mysterious figure who instilled terror into the people of Texarkana as simple nights became a living nightmare. It was February 22, 1946, a cold Friday evening. Jimmy Hollis, 25 years of age, and his girlfriend, Mary Jean Larry, were 19 years old, parked on a secluded road familiarly known to locals as a lover's lane, just out of Texarkana. They had no idea or expectations about what would happen next, just a quiet moment alone in the quiet and out of the constantly nosy sights of other people. But as they sat in their car, an unexpected terror emerged from the darkness. A figure approached their car, and first of all, Jimmy and Mary Jean thought he was a policeman. The figure had a flashlight, and they thought that they were caught in a place where they shouldn't be. That was only revealed by the fact when the figure approached closer with them, noticing something chilling. The man wasn't in uniform. He had a white sack over his head, oddly fashioned with holes cut out for eyes. He told Jimmy and Mary Jean to get out of the car at gunpoint without warning. They felt their fear grow as they obeyed. The figure turned to Jimmy and ordered him to drop his pants. Jimmy was confused and stood there for a moment, which was met with instant violence. The masked man hit Jimmy on the head with a blunt instrument, which broke open his skull. With that, the girl ran, Mary Jean frightened and dazed. He caught her and beat the poor girl in the worst way. Miraculously, she escaped, barefoot in the woods to the first house she found, where she pounded on the door frantically, begging someone to let her in for safety. Jimmy and Mary Jean survived that night, but the scars, physical and emotional, would be deep. The town of Texarkana, however, was just at the dawn of all the nightmares that were going to follow. The police were baffled. They had no positive leads, no fingerprints, no real evidence. Who was this masked man? What was his motive? Was it an isolated incident, or was something much worse unfolding? The feeling of fear was starting to fall over the town, however, not for too much longer, as this feeling would quickly turn to frantic panic. The following spring, just a few weeks later, on March 24th, 1946, the terror worsened. Richard Griffin, 29, and his girlfriend, Polly Ann Moore, 17, were found dead in their car on another lonely road. Like Jimmy and Mary Jean, they were lovers parked in a secluded spot, enjoying what they hoped would be a quiet evening, but they never went home. A passing motorist made the grim discovery the following morning. Griffin was slumped in the front seat and shot twice in the back of the head. Polly Ann's body was found outside the car, lying on a blanket. She too had been shot in the back of the head. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication that either victim had tried to run. They had been caught totally off guard, as if death had come upon them quickly and without any warning. This second attack shocked the community. Now it seemed that this attack on Jimmy and Mary Jean was not a one-time attack. There was almost an indication of a pattern: young couples, seclusion, and a ruthless killer who seemed to disappear into the air after every attack. Fear encircled the town of Texarkana. Streets once associated with stillness now flowed with whispers about a hooded murderer who roamed at twilight hours. People started locking their doors even in the evenings, and as if to emphasize the point, police patrolled the roads day and night. Local hardware stores sold out of locks, weapons, and ammunition, since the citizens were arming themselves for what seemed like a war on their doorsteps. The police were running out of leads, and the killer was leaving no evidence behind. All they knew was that he would strike again. But when? April 13, 1946. The most bold and the most terrifying of the Phantom Killer's attacks was his third. This time the victims were Betty Jo Booker, 15 years old, and her friend, 17-year-old Paul Martin. Betty Jo was a child prodigy who had just finished playing at a local VFW club that evening. Paul had gone to pick her up afterward, and they were headed home when they vanished. A desolate road, the following morning, hosted the body of Paul Martin, shot 4 times in the face, shoulder, back, and neck area. It was an ugly scene. 2 hours later, 2 miles from that place, Betty Jo's body was found, shot twice through the chest and through the face. She had brought her saxophone to the dance. The saxophone was gone, lost. This attack shocked Texarkana to its core. Betty Jo was just a senior high school girl, full of life and talent, her dreams, future. In the blink of an eye, that future would be gone, and the fear turned to hysteria. By nightfall, the streets of Texarkana were deserted. A curfew was placed, and the rumors spread like wildfire. Was he somebody they knew? A neighbor? A friend? Could it be someone walking among them, blending into the community only to strike when the moment is right? The newspapers, however, labeled him the Phantom Killer, and the more they named him that, the more mysterious and fearful he seemed to everyone. With police scrambling to solve the case, Texarkana was a town on edge, its residents living in constant fear of when the next attack would be. The Phantom's last known assault occurred on May 3, 1946, and it was not at all like the previous ones. A murderer did not lash out at a young couple parked in an automobile as in the attacks before, but broke into the house of middle-aged Virgil and Katie Starks on the edge of Texarkana. It was brazen and intimidating enough to be deadly. That evening, Virgil Starks sat in his living room listening to the radio when his death was welcomed by the Phantom Killer. From outside, through a window, the Phantom Killer shot Virgil twice from behind the head, killing him instantly. Katie Starks, on hearing her husband's death through the gunshots, rushed to the side of her husband as another murder of the killer was being orchestrated. She found Virgil slumped in the chair, blood forming puddles around him. When she realized what had happened, she too was shot twice in the face. Katie was a fighter, though. She escaped from the house, running into a neighbor's home while having trailed blood behind. Miraculously, she survived, but never got over those wounds emotionally. The attack landed the city of Texarkana in full-blown chaos. The Phantom Killer had entered into the sanctity of someone's home. No one was safe, not even in their own house. The string of tension, now going on for months, went overboard. Panic spread like wildfire, and Texarkana became a ghost town after dark. Still, Phantom Killer seemed to vanish into thin air as a wide manhunt ensued. There would be no more accounts of attacks after the shooting of the Starks. The townspeople, and by this time the police as well, were left dazed with no directions to think. After the Starks attacked, the Texas and Arkansas law enforcement, along with the FBI, launched one of the most extensive manhunts in American history. The pressure to catch the killer was intense, and no stone was left unturned. All little leads, however silly or weird, were pursued, followed, and chased down. The killer still managed to be one step ahead. One suspect was U.L. Swinney, who also happened to be a small-time thief and forger. His wife, Peggy, even testified that he was the phantom killer and said that she knew some known facts of the crime not publicly known. However, at times, her testimony was contradictory, and later she withdrew her confession. Some scientists thought Swinney was the phantom killer, but nothing solid was discovered to link him with the killings. Swinney was later jailed based on other charges, while the bodies of victims continued piling up. He was kept under surveillance, and after some time the attack stopped. Up to now, many believe that Swinney was indeed the phantom killer, while others view him as just another criminal who lucked out with an unstable wife. Other suspects came and went, each one investigated, questioned, and eventually cleared. The police had to deal with an ocean of false leads, dead ends, and red herrings. Some believed that the phantom killer had just moved on to another town, or perhaps to another state. Others may think that the killer perhaps died or was already in jail for another crime. Without any evidence to support these claims, though, the theories remained, well, just speculation. As weeks became months, and months changed to years, the investigation went cold. All they were left with was fear and possibly one or two suspects. The phantom killer disappeared like a ghost in the dead of night, and townspeople would forever remember those merciless memories of 1946. The legend of the phantom killer grew like an open wound over the years. In 1976, the legend was even turned into a low-budget horror film called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which came to dramatize the Texarkana murders. The movie took most Hollywood liberties, but it did cement the town into a spooky place in American popular culture. In Texarkana, for instance, there were mixed reviews. While some citizens felt resentful that their town's most haunting chapter was there for all the world to see as a mass entertainment spectacle, others played it down, refusing to have their town associated with a crime that would forever be linked to them, whether they wanted it or not. Now, however, the case of the Texarkana Strangler made headlines again, and people from all over flocked to Texarkana in hopes of finding some new clue or clearing up the mystery once and for all. Still, the case continued to be as cold as it ever was. At a more bizarre turn of events, the town of Texarkana annually screens The Town That Dreaded Sundown in October through the projection of the movie onto a large screen in one of its parks. What used to be a source of dread and trauma is now a cultural event as townspeople come together to tackle their dark past in a communal activity. It's a weird kind of emotional release and spectacle, yet also reminds people that the phantom killer was never caught. To this day, the question remains, who was the phantom killer, and is the killer still out there? Of course, over the years, numerous theories have developed about who the phantom killer might be. Some said he was a local man. One who knew Texarkana better than anyone could know its back roads and hiding spots. Others said that he may have been a transient, someone who floated through town and then melted away into nowhere after the killings, never to be seen again. Another very popular theory is U.L. Swinney, a man who was apprehended and put behind bars for other crimes, but whose wife had indeed pointed him out before as the killer. He certainly has one of the most interesting backgrounds going around with his predatory crime, bizarre behavior in court, and circumstantial evidence collected around his case, making him an ideal suspect. However, no concrete evidence backs this fact, and many still doubt if Swinney is indeed the Phantom. Another theory is that the Phantom killer was a returned soldier from World War II and psychologically damaged from his experience while in combat. Some believe the killer acted under post-traumatic stress or other war-related trauma. There are even wilder theories that the killer was part of a larger conspiracy or that multiple people were involved in the murders. A lack of clear motive or pattern fuels these speculations. But one of the most chillingly plausible theories is that the phantom killer simply stopped killing because he didn't need to anymore. Most serial killers kill because they feel compelled to. This theory implies that the phantom was able to stop at will, perhaps because he'd gotten whatever it was he needed from the killings, or perhaps because the intense attention of the police made it too risky for him to keep on. Whatever the reason, the point is this: the phantom killer was never caught. The Texarkana Phantom Killer case has risen over the decades as one of America's most renowned unsolved mysteries. Criminologists, amateur detectives, and true crime maniacs have all studied this case. It is still a global interest, so much for the brutality of the crimes themselves as for this mysterious killer. Why the mask? Why had he preferred such young couples as his victims? Was there anything sane about these acts of a mad mind? Or did it purely come out of the rank madness of the individual? Texarkana is, of course, a different city today than it was in 1946, but the memory of the phantom killer still lingers. What occurred way back then has become a permanent part of the town's history, a ghost that haunts the community to this very day. Many say that this is an unsolved mystery, where the public never forgets that not every secret is solved, and not every murderer is caught. The phantom killer continues to hang in the background, there in the fog of time perhaps for the day the mask of anonymity will be thrown to reveal his real identity. But until that day comes, the town of Texarkana will live in the shadow of its most infamous resident, a phantom who struck from darkness and disappeared into nothingness. And thus we are left with the horrifying truth that the phantom killer was never found and never apprehended. A faceless terror had torn lives to shreds in Texarkana, and yet justice was not done. This case remains one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries of American history, and the narrative reminds us of the darkness that might hide in plain sight. As you finish listening to this story, you might even feel a chill run down your spine and worry, was the phantom just something of Texarkana's past? Or could he or someone else still be lurking in the shadows today? What do you think of this mystery? Let us know your opinions in the comments below. And if you are in the mood of another spine-chilling story, then I would encourage you to check out the story about Dutch Schultz right now. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.